insurgency, counterinsurgency, terrorism, espionage, money laundering, antiquities dealing, psychological torture, penal labor. Am I talking about the latest installment in Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell? Or am I talking about Star Wars? Andor has become one of the most layered and complex shows that Star Wars has ever delivered on. We've said it again and again on this show that Andor is probably one of the best shows that Disney Plus has put out so far in its entire tenure. My name is Lord Deathman, and you are listening to the Podcast of Champions. On today's show, we're going to be reviewing Daughter of Ferrix, the latest episode of Andor. Please be careful for spoilers because we're going to be talking about the episode in depth. And before I get to introductions to the panel, I'd like to let you know that we're available on social media. Check us out, Facebook, Twitter, although Twitter may be imploding and it may disappear at any moment. We're still there. And Instagram. You can also join us in the conversation at sakar.freeforums.net if you want to get on board and start talking in our community, or if you want the opportunity to join us here on the show. All right, I'm going to introduce the folks in the panel today. We have the Grandmaster joining us from his throne.
Hello.
We also have Merv joining us.
How are you
today?
Good.
All right. And last but certainly not least, we have Taylor, the fan without fear, joining us for this discussion as well.
Hey, good to be here.
Excellent. Now that we've gotten our introductions out of the way, we've got a powerful panel here. Every player on this team is going to offer us some insight in terms of the discussion, but there seems to be no end to the amount of discussion that you can have with a show that has the quality of Andor. So if you don't know how the show works, we do 3 rounds of discussion. 1 round where we talk about fast, quick impressions, a second round where we go into a deep dive, and then finally we will get in our 3rd round. So I'm going to start the discussion off today with you, Taylor. Tell us what your first impressions of, what do you feel about Daughters of Ferrix? Is it on the same quality level as all the things that we've seen come before, or do you think we've finally taken a slight dip in quality with this one?
No, I think the quality has been excellent, and this episode has been just as good quality wise. Story wise, it's kind of a slow episode because it's setting up for the season finale next week. But I think it did a great job of that. It's got a lot of parts in motion that I suspect will come together in the final episode. But yeah, this episode was excellent.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. Even though it was a slower paced episode, it still had a lot to offer in terms of story and setting up pieces in such a way that we're probably getting close to the climax or whatever's going to happen in the final episode, the season finale. Thank you for those remarks, Taylor. Moving on to Merv, your quick impression of Daughter of Ferrix.
I loved it. There was so much focus on grief in it. I thought that resonated very well with especially the characters of B2 and Cassian in the end. And then, there's been so many great acting moments, but how can you not love Luthen even more after every scene? Like every time I see Stellan Skarsgård's character, I love him even more. But overall, like I just like Taylor said, there's a lot of, it seems like we're setting everything up to conclude in Ferrix, and I'm just curious to see how all these worlds are going to collide. Every plot thread almost is pointing back to Ferrix at the moment, and it's really just a great emotional episode for the precursor to what I assume is going to be an action-packed finale. That's just my assumption, but I loved it a lot.
Yeah, it seems that Ferrix is the new Tatooine. Everyone's going to be closing in on Ferrix. So we've got multiple parties all looking for Andor. Thanks for the remarks, Merv. Moving on to the Grandmaster, last but not least here. What did you think of Daughter of Ferrix, episode 11?
I agree with Taylor, actually. On quality-wise, it's still top. But it is, story-wise, it was a little bit slower and a little bit more like an episode where you feel the calm before the storm that is about to happen. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. And um, there are some details I want to unpack later, but indeed, Ferrix is like Tatooine. Everybody comes there, even though it's a planet of nothing. And yeah, I just can't wait, and everybody is in on it. I mean, even Cyril. Yeah, it's gonna be great next week, no doubt. I do hope that they don't lose character, story, stuff like that. What makes this show so great, and throw it all away for like a Book of Boba Fett style finale, where it's more about the action figures shooting at each other than anything else. That's my little fear for next week, but we can discuss that next week.
We get a little Star Wars action in this episode. So they did give us the traditional Star Wars, but not too much. They were like, we're going to keep this very layered. We're going to keep this, mostly as a espionage drama. But yeah, a lot to love in this episode. And as we got the quick reviews from the panel, let's do another round. And this time, let's do a deep dive. I'm going to start with you again, Taylor. What did you like about this episode? What didn't you like? And anything in between?
I like those two aliens on the planet. You know, people have been complaining not enough aliens. Well, we got a couple of doozies in this one, and I thought they were really well done, actually. Not just their appearance, which was pretty cool and humorous in its own way, but the way they spoke too was very creative. I couldn't understand them all that well, but it still had me glued to it. I was riveted to it because I wanted to understand their syntax and the way they use words and the way they communicate. So it was all very interesting, and I love that Spider-Man trap they had to put the the net onto them as they were trying to get to the ship. The booby trap set up, and I guess they somehow Andor convinced them to let him go and let him take the ship, or I don't know if they took him in the ship themselves or if they gave him the ship. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I like that he was able to convince them that he wasn't the reason their planet's getting all messed up by these prisons polluting the water. And they let him go. So I thought that was a good scene. It was a very Star Wars-y scene. The other thing, we got a space battle at the end. That was pretty good. I thought it was interesting. Luthen's ship has lightsabers built into it. Didn't see that one. Didn't see that one coming. He did the spin around and sliced the TIE fighters in half. So that was pretty unexpected and pretty cool. So I like that. I liked how that whole scene unfolded. The way the Imperial patrol ship or whatever it was stopped him, put him in the tractor beam, and then he had some countermeasures built into his ship to destroy their tractor beam. And then of course he used the guns and the lightsaber things on the ship to get away from the TIE fighter. So it was really well done action scene, and again very in line with Star Wars. The other stuff in the show, I mean, there was the big scene with Mon Mothma and her, her dilemma, her, trying to find a way to fund her rebellion and not get caught and not have to set her daughter up with some scumbag's kid. But she's working very hard through that. And then, of course, the whole thing with Andor's mother passing away and how that is kind of the catalyst, how the word has gotten out to everyone, has got out to the ISB, it's gotten to Cyril, if that's the guy's name. And, of course, it got to Andor, too. So, like you said, looks like everyone's going to a funeral and all heck is going to break loose there, apparently. But we'll see. yeah, it was all a very high quality episode all the way through. It's just again, it was very much a setting up episode.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like they're definitely moving all of the pieces into position for one hell of a finale. Everyone is talking about Luthen, Taylor. Do you think he deserves his own spinoff? Luthen?
I don't. I mean, I didn't think of that, but I don't think so. No, I think he's good as a character in this particular series, at least for now. I'm trying to figure out what's the deal. Do any of you guys know when they searched Luthen, he had that object with him that looked like a lightsaber, but I don't think it was a lightsaber. Does anybody know
Was either.
what that was?
No.
The only thing I'll say is whenever we first meet Luthen, he had a long like walking stick, and I was wondering if it retracts.
Oh, maybe.
Or it's just an antiquity for a shop as a cover up for what he's really doing.
Yeah, that could be. Because I don't think they would have just given it back to him if it was a lightsaber.
I feel like people would recognize if it was a lightsaber,
right,
too.
Exactly. Yeah. And since Jedi are pretty much public enemy number one in the Empire, I don't think he'd be walking around with one.
Right.
And but that that's still the the lasers on his ship, or I should say the lightsabers on his ship, brings up the question: is he a Jedi, or does he have some connection to the Jedi? More questions.
Who knows? We just know as a spy master, he's got Jedi level skill at his job.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a real practitioner. And those lightsabers, his countermeasures against the tractor beam, that was just a really exciting sequence. And it felt there's a truthfulness to it in terms of he could have just slid by that. Weaker writers would have just let him go and been like, oh, he's just an antiquities dealer. We're going to let him go. But there's a heightened sense of security throughout the sector. And people are like, let's get good practice boarding these ships and taking a look around. But I didn't expect Luthen to be as prepared as he was. But he walks into some dangerous situations. So it makes perfect sense. And the writing is great. But anything else come to mind, Taylor, with regards to your deep dive analysis?
No.
Yeah. I enjoyed those two aliens as well. And their alien patois, their accents, whatever was going on. And I like the way that they just almost unilaterally decide, or together, that the Empire is really the enemy here. Let's give this guy that we just met our quad jumper and send him on submission to help, deal with our oceans. And we're going to stay here and work on the mucus traps and all that kind of stuff. We'll let these guys figure it out in terms of starting up a rebellion. So great characters and satisfying the alien quotient that you need as far as Star Wars goes. Maybe a little too late, but certainly not too little. I thought it was a great addition to the episode. But turning to you, Grandmaster, let's get your deep dive analysis of this particular episode. High points, peaks, anything in between. What really stood out to you?
What stood out to me? Still the writing, actually. I still think the dialogue and the way things happen. I mean, the discussion between Val and Mon Mothma was, again, very good. And the way Mon Mothma broke while she say, I have found a solution, while Val walks away to greet her niece. Yeah, it's great. Great writing, great acting, again. I love how all those chess pieces are moving towards one board now, and I really cannot wait to see what happens next week. Yeah, indeed. I also wrote down Luthen's ship is like a lightsaber, and actually Darth Maul's lightsaber. I mean, it has two beams. You could flip them around. It's to me, it felt very impressive. That whole space battle. There are not a lot of space battles in Andor, but the one we got are excellent and top notch and among the best of Star Wars. I agree with my friend Merv here. Luthen is a very good character. I think he's the best character in the show, with the most interesting arc and certainly the most interesting lines, as we saw last week, and this week was no different. he has his doubts on what to do with the Anton Krieger situation, and he expresses them to Saw, maybe not the most empathic person in the Star Wars universe, but still, that was also a great scene. You could see him crawl into Saw Gerrera's head, which was awesome to see. Great acting from both actors, both Stellan Skarsgård as Force Whitaker. So yeah, well, Taylor said it all actually. One thing that was really funny to me was the Ferrix burial rites. It had a real Pink Floyd vibe. After all, you're just another brick in the wall. That was really funny to me. And I also love how they foreshadow Andor's death constantly. This episode, he actually finds out about his mom's death on a similar location where he actually is going to die. So beaches and sea are very reminiscent of death for Andor. Go rewatch Rogue One and it will hit you. Basically that's it. I have not real negatives for this week's episode. We got it all. We got great acting, great writing, a great action scene, and a perfect setup for an awesome finale. I really hope Andor sticks the landing for season 1, because I think it's right up there with the best season 1s in television history.
Wow, that's extremely high praise. Quick question for you. Saw kind of comes off as a Johnny come lately to the plan to go after the facility, the ISB facility that they're putting Anto Krieger into. What did you make of that exchange? There are lots of great dramatic exchanges in this episode, but I thought the Forrest Whitaker and Stellan Skarsgård work was particularly strong.
Yeah, Saw to me is an opportunist. He doesn't really want to commit to a unified rebellion. I mean, we see still that he has not fully committed the moment he dies in Rogue One. He's still somewhat of a stand out. He does not fit in. He has his own methods, which people don't approve of, as we have seen. So he sees an opportunity probably to gain a lot with little risk, and he wants to take that. He's not really, he's committed to the cause, but as long as it serves him, if you know what I mean.
As long as it's on his terms, it seems.
Yeah, exactly. And the moment Luthen gives him the dilemma, he starts to get paranoid, because he's a paranoid man. And I found it really fascinating, to quote Mr. Spock. It was really engaging, and the discussion between Luthen and Saw was one of the best dialogues in this show, and that says a lot. I really loved it, and the way, like I said before, the way Luthen crawled into Saw's head, and you saw him spread that doubt, and Forrest Whitaker excellently acted that. It was really, really well done. It was one of the highlights of this week's episode for me.
Yeah, it really was. You do get the sense that Saw is paranoid, and that is very consistent from his portrayal in Rogue One, where he was even more paranoid and seemed to have some more serious respiratory issues. But that being said, Merv, we're going to go to you last but not least. High points, peaks, valleys, everything in between for Daughter of Ferrix. Tell me what stood out to you in this episode.
Luthen as a character in this episode especially, you really felt the sense that he says it in like episode 2 or 3 whenever he meets Cassian for the first time, like make your exit on the way in or something like that, like plan your exit on the way in. In his conversation with You just said his name, Saw. His conversation with Saw and the way he manipulated that whole situation to get a gun, to point it at Saw, to get him to calm down, like just the way he de-escalated that situation by escalating it even further, which is his whole plan with this rebellion in the first place, was just great. And then the whole situation in space with his ship was phenomenal. That stood out as the highlight of the episode. But just to bring up some other things, last week, having what's his name say that he couldn't swim, like pretty much broke you. But this week, B2 Emo, I never felt so sad for a droid in my life. You wanted to hug him. You know what I mean? Between his stuttering and his mechanical whimper, if you had the closed captions on, they actually wrote in mechanical whimper. You're like, come on. Like, I'm already on the verge of tears just because of this guy. It's not even like Marva was a fine character, but seeing his reaction, the droid's reaction to this, like really kind of breaks you. And I really like that Cassian went to Niamos, because I thought, putting myself whenever we were in the prison scene or whenever he escapes, it's like, well, where's he going to go? And my first thought was, well, he still has that thing that he hid, the case full of money or whatever, and then his first thing was to go to Niamos. And I just like that, like, okay, so I'm thinking properly. And it just, makes me think that I know what's going on. But we saw Anto Krieger for the first time. He's been mentioned for several episodes, and we see him, and turns out he's a bald fat guy with a beard. So now I have somebody to dress up as for Halloween, so it's going to work out.
It turns out that Merv was Anto Krieger.
It was me the whole time.
That's why they didn't want to show him.
Unfortunately, it sounds like he's a dead man, but yeah.
Him and 30 other guys.
Right. I forget 30 other guys that have to go down.
I thought that was pretty poignant too, because it shows that like Luthen isn't forgetting about anyone. He's mentioning, these deaths do kind of weigh on his conscience a lot. He's every time Saul mentioned, 30 guys in plus Krieger, it's like he's not forgetting that one. You know what I mean? There were a lot of like cool little nods to Rogue One in this. Mentioned the sunset at the end with Cassian. I mean, it's very visually reminiscent of the last thing we saw Cassian in, which was Rogue One. No spoilers, but there is a sunset kind of, or sunrise. I couldn't tell what it was.
It's sort of both, if you think about it.
Yeah. And also, Cassian mentions, or whenever he calls Marva, or tries to get contact with Marva, he says like, she would be proud of me. He doesn't get to tell her that, but his words to the main female in Rogue One were like, his last words to her were like, your father would be very proud, or something like that. And it's like the same note, like, things that he wish he could hear from Marva, he's saying to her. It was very reminiscent. So I liked all that. It was just a really
the character you're thinking of.
Jyn Erso, yes.
Yeah.
In Bix is apparently broken. She looks in a really bad way, and I think the big tell there is that the Empire, especially Deidre, isn't going to be confused into thinking that they captured Axis by killing Anton Krieger. They know that. I think the assumption's there. We don't hear her say it, but she looks broken. So I'm assuming she's going to say that that's not the man that she introduced Cassian to. So they're still going to be on the hunt for Axis, So I wonder if this is going to lead the Resistance into a false sense of security, like we've given them their scapegoat and now they'll be confused or back off. And I'm just wondering what complications are going to come from that in the future. If not this season, I know there's going to be more seasons.
Yeah, moving into the next season.
Yeah. But overall, I love this episode. I thought it was a great, like Grandmaster said, calm before the storm. I think next episode is going to be hectic. Hopefully, like you said, it keeps the same vibe that the show's had the whole way, where everything makes sense. I don't need all the toys in the toy box out and onto the floor mat. But it seems like everything's headed into that direction, or at least a lot of several different characters with motivations are all going to meet up at the same point.
Right. Yeah. What I'm hoping for is something that is satisfying.
Yes.
And if they continue the story as organically as they have done today, and I like your metaphor. Star Wars is all about taking out all of your toys out of the toy chest and taking the coolest ones and banging them together to get to have that imaginary fight that you think is going to be cool. But this is really it's there's a bit more here where it's very layered, it's very complex. There are a lot of ideas that they bring to the table. I mean, I never thought that I'd see characters struggling with their finances in Star Wars. Mon Mothma is money laundering. She's trying to move money from one location to the next, and the stakes are high. They couldn't be any higher for all of these characters that are involved in the show. Bix with the psychological torture. There's no saviors. There's no ex machina that comes in and kind of saves her from that. She got psychologically tortured. She's suffering from the PTSD, and she's giving everybody up. She's giving everybody up.
Mhm.
That's just incredible for Star Wars. Where's Luke Skywalker to come in with a lightsaber and save Bix? It's not happening on Andor.
Not for a few years.
Yeah. Right. Not for a few years yet, at the very least. But while I wax poetic about this film, we still have some work to do here on the panel. So keep it locked in. We are about to go around the table and get the ratings for this episode, Daughter of Ferrix, which I believe is the penultimate episode. Next time, we're going to be talking about the finale. So we do hope you join us for that conversation too. But without further ado, Taylor, let's start with you. What is your rating for this episode of Andor?
Because it was a little on the slow side, even though it was, still the high quality of the whole show. But because it was a little on the slow side, I'll give it a 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. Strong grade right there. So we're starting off the proceedings with high praise. Next, we'll go to the Grandmaster for your rating.
I'm going 9 out of 10. Yeah, because it's just not on the level of the previous 2-3 episodes we gotten. And I don't mean that quality-wise. It just was a little less engaging, if you know what I mean.
Right.
A little less actual seat work, and which it was still very good, but 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10. And I think it's because we're all detecting not a decrease in quality, but a slowing down in the pace. But we still have this very beautiful and rich canvas that they're working from.
Gandalf would say the breath before the plunge.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Great quote. Fantastic. But yes, thank you for the grade there. We've got an 8 and a 9. Merv, it's up to you. Will you break up this love fest, or are you going to see it further? Self. What's your rating?
I'll give it an 8 out of 10 also. I do think it was just, it was setting up a bit, and it did what it did effectively, but it's not, it had some great dialogue and great scenes, but, it was just a little less, I think engaging is a good word for it.
Right. There are one or two great surprises there, but for the most part, it's a very lean, economic episode that just tries to continue and further the stories along without, and I like the level of sophistication. They're not throwing in a surprise every minute. It's not cliffhangers for the sake of cliffhangering. It's not, let's make a dramatic 180 turn for no reason other than to kind of do a shock and awe approach to the storytelling. But that's not to say that other Star Wars series that use those techniques are bad. I'm just saying that it's a refreshing change here on Andor. But all right, we've got all of the ratings in. Andor continues to be one of the best shows on Disney Plus, as I've said millions of times before. You should keep an eye out on other streaming channels, because I read, and I have it on good authority, that the first 2 episodes for Andor are going to be appearing on Hulu. I think they're going to drop them on ABC. and a couple of other services. So I think Disney does understand that they have something that's accessible to a different kind of audience to get into Star Wars. So while I can't pretend to know the machinations of a complex corporate media corporation in terms of what they're doing, I do think that they feel that they have something special because they could have done this with The Mandalorian. They could have done it with Obi-Wan, put these things on some other streaming services where you have an opportunity to get a taste or a sample, but they're doing it with Andor because I honestly think that they know they have a different way in for different kinds of fans to kind of get involved with Star Wars. So be on the lookout for that. And of course, parting is such sweet sorrow. We are concluding this episode by saying that once again, you can I'm sorry. I had a follow-up from Taylor before I close out. Let me not forget the fan without fear. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to mention one thing, and I don't know if it's really relevant or not, but did anyone, if I'm not mistaken, those lightsabers on the ship were red, and only certain people have red lightsabers, so I don't know if that is supposed to indicate something to us or not.
Oh, okay. Now we have a conspiracy theory in on this episode. Now we need one. We still don't know if Cyril's mother is imaginary, and now it's possible that Luthen could be a Sith Lord.
Darth Luthen.
It works. Darth Luthen. I like it. I like it. So, a last minute tidbit for those who are listening at home. Think it over. We may circle back to it next week to see if yeah, it was hard for me to say whether those were lightsabers or whether they're just lasers. But man, it is Star Wars. Those were lightsabers. Those were lightsabers. And it also goes to show you that the TIE fighter, although an elegant flying machine, can really easily be destabilized. All you have to do is take like a piece off of it, and that thing just goes flying and blows up out into nowhere. So props to all those guys that put on the dark helmet and get into the TIE fighter to do their thing. It's a hazardous job. But all right, guys. So again, let me do take two on my closing here. It's been great talking to the panel here. I hope you've had a good time listening to us at home. We do hope that you're safe, that you're well, that you're happy, that you are into your fandom as much as we are into it. You can catch us on socials on all the various channels I just mentioned before. You can jump onto the website, sakar.freeforums.net, join the community, start some discussion today. You also have an opportunity to jump on the show. And until next time, may the force be with you.